I'm looking around at every area of my life where I'm not fulfilled, and that was a hard pill to swallow. Voids will determine values. Whatever we perceive to be missing in life, we will seek to fill that value.
Struggles are feedback rather than failures. That discipline grows from values rather than willpower.
Every human being has something remarkable to offer the world.
What if I told you that your procrastination isn't a character flaw? It's actually feedback. And the voice in your head telling you you're not enough, that might not even be yours. Today's guest went from $20,000 in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, to building a multi-million-dollar empire. But here's the twist. He says the real breakthrough wasn't about making money. It was about unlearning the lies he'd been telling himself. This is going to shatter everything you think you know about success, discipline, and leadership. Let's dive in. Thank you, Keala. Is it Hawaiian?
I'm originally born and raised in Hawaii, so I'm almost 40% Hawaiian. But we've lived in Vegas for 9 years, since 2016, and we literally just moved. I'm at my ranch in Texas right now. It's a little 300-acre ranch that we picked up, and we just moved here we got here on Monday, so 5 days ago.
Cool, yeah. I was just listening to Russell Brunson and Ty Lopez on the podcast together, and a lot of my audience know who those people are, and I know you do too, but they were talking about, like, you have to buy a ranch or a farm. You have to do that.
Ty's big on having a farm these days and being out, like being connected to nature. This is an interesting story, and I don't want to get too far off track here, but I bought this thing a couple of years ago for one of my companies, our personal development company, which we'll probably end up talking quite a bit about. We do a lot of leadership training. And a good portion of that ends up being these retreats. For a while, I was renting other people's ranches, and then the cost associated with that, the cost of fulfillment associated with that is obviously, there's a pretty well-paid middleman. And so basically I bought the ranch to help bring down our fulfillment costs about 2 years ago. Then we were in Dallas for a conference, and my fiance, she was like, we should go stay out at the ranch. I'm like, what? I don't want to stay at the ranch. Are you kidding me? There's nothing out there. There's a house, a nice 6,000 square foot house. But I was like, I don't want to stay out there. It's out in the middle of the country. And she goes, but we should get familiar with it because we're going to build on it. And I was like, no, that's why we hired engineers and architects. So we don't need to be there. I'm from the city. I'm in the center of Las Vegas where everything's happening. And so, of course, she wins because most of us know how that goes. And so I was like, all right, we'll stay out there for a couple of weeks after the conference. We stayed out here for 2 weeks. And when it was time to go home, I just told her, I was like, babe, like, this is the first time we've gone anywhere and I don't want to go home. And that's the moment that we knew that we were going to move here eventually. And we finally just made that move 5 days ago.
That's so awesome, bro. From Vegas to there is a huge difference.
Big difference, bro. The nicest restaurant we got near us is a Chili's. Nothing against Chili's. I hope it's not one of your sponsors, Jason. You go from 5-star to Chili's, but
that would be.
It's different. The reason that Ty talks about it, the reason I think, and I didn't know Ty was into that until I already had the place, is just that connection with nature. If you think about it, for 10,000 years of written human history, for 9,800 of those years, we lived more like I'm living today than we do the last couple hundred years, right? And so I think that there's just is something natural about it. I'm just as busy out here. I'm on just as many calls. I'm just as busy. I'm just as much on the grind, but I feel less stressed.
Yes.
Because,
I know,
I walk outside and it's a park.
That's so cool. That's so awesome. Yeah. And it's a privilege to be able to do that. And that's kind of where I wanted to go from 20,000 in debt to having a large ranch with a 6,000 square foot house. How did that identity shift? We'll get into that part, but maybe for everyone who doesn't know you, you could kind of share your story.
So back in 2009, I came home from a barbecue with friends of mine and I, and sitting on my bed, I was living with some roommates at the time, and sitting on my bed was a stack of photographs. And I remember walking into the room and being like, what is that? And so I walk up to the bed because I'm thinking, like, who put that there? Right? I had 3 roommates at the time and whatnot, so I thought maybe one of it was them. Anyway, I walk up, I grab a stack of photographs, and they're all ripped in half. And I'm sifting through these photos. There's maybe about a dozen of them. At the bottom of it was a note, and the note said, "Picture me out of your life." And it was from my girlfriend of 4.5 years. She broke up with me. Yeah, that was, and I didn't see that coming. Any women listening to this will be like, of course you didn't see it coming. That's because you don't listen. And I'm sure that's part of it. But
right.
I initially thought, we'll get back together. We'll figure it out. Obviously, she's upset. Fast forward 3 weeks later, and we had to figure it out. She's not answering any of my emails, any of my text messages, any phone calls. I was basically left on red. I had already moved out of the house with the roommates. I'd moved back in with my mom because I couldn't afford the rent. There's this moment where I'm pacing up and down the hallway in my mom's house. I could tell you what I was wearing. I could show you the exact spot I was standing when it hit me. And it was just like an epiphany. And the epiphany was, what if it's me? What if it's me? I'm looking around at every area of my life where I'm not fulfilled. I'm not getting the results that I want. And the only thing that those things had in common was me. And that was a hard pill to swallow. I'm sure most of your audience has already had that moment in their life. But for me, it was a hard pill to swallow. And at the same time, it was satisfying because I realized, well, if it's me, I can do something about me. I spent all these years trying to change everybody else and everything else. And the only thing that's actually in my power to change is me. That set me down the road of personal development. That's when I started picking up my first personal development books, eventually started going to seminars and really investing in myself. And I became fascinated right away with behavioral change, philosophy, neuroscience, understanding what creates our behaviors, characteristics, and traits, how our internal reality creates our external reality, and just been focused on for the last 15 years, just really been focused on being a master of that. I went from broke, working at a coffee shop, minimum wage, $20,000 in debt. Girlfriend dumped me after 4.5 years together. I went from that to started out as an affiliate marketer, made my first million there, launched my coaching business on the back end of that before everybody and their brother had a coaching business. We scaled that to $1 million a month in 4 months. We did over 140 million in that business. At peak, we were doing $3.5–4 million a month, $1 million a month of profit take home. It's how you get a ranch. And all along, I've felt like these things that we'll end up talking about here are like they've been my secret weapon behind me, an advantage over other people in my industry. I became the #1 affiliate in the world for multiple offers, including Russell called me. We had a call a couple of weeks back and he was like, "Hey, how were you sending all of that traffic?" And when you got the master himself hitting you up. Last year I sold my business and I decided to pivot to what was really my first love. I've had the benefit of building a business or living a life where there is no distinction between my vocation and my vacation. On purpose, inspired. Does that mean that every single moment is happy? No, but it means I'm on a mission. They're like as alive and awake as you can be. I wish that I could give that gift to everyone. Unfortunately, you can't bottle it up and just sell it. And if you could, it wouldn't be worth much.
Right.
But I want to spend the rest of my life teaching those things that I've learned that help me do that. I want to spend the rest of my life sharing that with other potential leaders.
No, I love that. And I want to speak just real quick, if you don't mind. I know there's a lot of 20-year-olds that listen to this and they're like, "What's wrong with me, bro?" I get these comments and DMs all the time from a 20-year-old guy. He's living with his mom. He plays video games. He's smoking weed all the time. He's like, "What doesn't my girlfriend like me?" He's not making any money. He has to bum money from his mom. And then like what you experienced, your girlfriend leaving you, what do you think was obviously you had to experience pain to go through that. But what would you tell a 20-year-old guy that's living this life that's just carefree and he doesn't give two fucks?
Yeah, I'm going to take a largely axiological, teleological perspective on this. For those that might not be aware, axiology is a study of values. Teleology is a study of purpose. Through the lens of axiology, we can observe that every human being has a set of values that governs their life. Whatever we value, we will utilize our resources. We will spend our resources in direct proportion to the things we value.
Right.
So every day, we're going to invest our primary resources, our time, energy, and money. However we invest our time, energy, and money will become our destiny. And we invest those things in direct proportion to the things that we value most. So the things that we value most in our life will get the majority of our time, energy, and money. And then the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Typically, we're going to run out of those resources before we run out of a to-do list. So every single one of us our life is demonstrating what we value most. We often have goals, which are conscious, and values, which are unconscious. And when our goals and our values are in conflict, or our conscious and unconscious minds, we're going to experience symptoms: procrastination, hesitation, frustration, self-sabotage, imposter syndrome, things like this. Those are not bad. Most of the guru industry is going to say you should overcome that, you lack discipline, blah, blah, blah. The reality is every single person on earth has discipline. It's just in what they value, they're extremely disciplined. You don't have to tell an 11-year-old boy to play video games. Like they'll do it till level 100 till 2 a.m. Those things exist as a way of making us conscious of our unconscious. That's up to ourselves, right? So if I don't have procrastination or self-sabotage what other symptom would I have let me know when I'm venturing away from the things that I value most in my life? Now, when we look at it through the lens of teleology, we would say that the brain is a telos-seeking machine. Telos meaning purpose. So our mind is designed to take us towards and help us fulfill whatever we perceive to be most valuable in our life, whatever we perceive to be most on purpose, right? So our mind is that vehicle. Now, voids will determine values. Whatever we perceive to be missing in life, we will seek to fill that value because the universe abhors a vacuum. And there are no vacuums in the universe. Like anything that is considered empty will be filled. And so wherever we perceive in our early childhood, early adulthood, wherever we perceive to be missing, we will seek to fill. If we grow up with, you and I, we come from a generation like children raised in the 80s and 90s, you have the anti-bullying generation, right? The parents were like, you shouldn't be, don't bully my kid. When I was growing up, my dad was like, listen, don't throw the first punch, but if somebody swings, beat their ass.
I'm a lot older than you. So mine was like, my dad was like, why didn't you kick his ass?
Exactly.
But yeah, like you said, don't throw the first punch. But if he does throw the punch, I expect you as my son to whoop his ass.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. And so when you have that generation raising children, what happens is you start to create this reality, this distortion for them that my feelings are something that are sacred and should be protected versus my feelings are something to be managed, right? I was raised in a household where it was like, that's your shit, deal with your shit. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Versus, no, they're wrong. They shouldn't have offended you. They shouldn't have hurt you, right? Now, notice that we want to have triumph without challenge. It's like, well, you think that they can have a triumph without having a challenge. One requires the other. So anyway, whatever we perceive to be missing will become what we most seek to fill in our life. But if we grow up without much missing in terms of all of our needs are taken care of, the bills are paid for us, mom and dad work hard, they pay for the car, they put a roof over I'm not pressed to have a job, yada, yada. Parents will get mad at, why is my child not more motivated? What have they been missing in their life? If they've not been missing much, oftentimes in seeking to be kind, we rob someone of their responsibility, productivity, dignity, and accountability.
Yeah, 100%, right.
So
this is interesting because Gary Vaynerchuk said this the other day, and I thought it was really cool. He said the reason you're giving money to your kids is because you really don't believe in them. And that's pretty harsh in a good way.
I think we buy our self-esteem, not me personally, but just as a generation, we buy our self-esteem by robbing them of theirs.
Oh, that's so good. Yes. 100%.
Yeah. When you have a young man or a young woman who is idle in life, unclear about where they're going, unclear about what direction they want to head, they're numbing out to avoid the pain of that reality, then the likelihood is that they've just not experienced enough pain or enough challenge to force them. There just hasn't been enough pressure through which they can become that diamond. But the reality is, even in those situations, if they are willing to look and willing to do the work and willing to assess themselves and take an introspective look at themselves, their life is demonstrating what they value most for it to be any other way. But we will oftentimes drown out our potential because we're so often listening to the voices on the outside. We live in the noisiest society that has ever existed in the history of the human race.
Right.
All our life, we're told by mother, father, preacher, teacher, sister, brother, media, social media, especially social media today, who we're supposed to be, need to be, have to be, should be, what it means to be successful, worthy, and enlightened. We tend to squelch the voice on the inside and drown it out with the voices on the outside and then become mastered by life. The master of life is the one who listens to the voice on the inside and drowns the voices on the outside.
That's so good. I know you say know thyself, lead thyself. I want to get into how you distinguish between our authentic self and then that programming that you're just talking about, whether it's social media or whatever, that we've absorbed, putting these false beliefs and then that creating the action or the thoughts that we have. So can you go into know thyself, lead thyself?
Yeah, for sure. Like I was saying earlier, through the lens of axiology, we can observe that every human being has a set of values that governs their life. Peter Drucker said, the business management guru, like most of what we know in business today, in the world of knowledge work, when we stopped 90% of us being on farms and started entering the workforce and creating knowledge work, a lot of what we know today came from Peter Drucker. He was quoted as saying, "Tell me what you value and I might believe you, but show me your bank account and your calendar and I'll show you what you value." And so if we're willing to look at our space, time, energy, and money, what do we fill our space with? Space. Where do we spend our time? Where do we spend our energy? And where do we spend our money? So if I can see your calendar and I know what's on your calendar, if I can know what energizes you, like where you derive energy from versus spending your energy for you to be as successful as you are with your podcast, I would imagine that, a great conversation with a great guest energizes you, drains you,
100%.
right?
Right.
So where do you derive your energy? And then money. Exactly how do you manage your money? If we were to look at your bank account, look at your bank statements, where exactly is that going? And then there's a few other things that we can look at, of course, and I have a free assessment that people can take. When we look at those things, we can start to see that our life demonstrates what's most meaningful and purposeful for us. It's in conflict with what we say we would like to have. So I'll give you an example. You have a father wakes up every day. First thing on his mind is his business. Businesses, like he's thinking about businesses, projects, the people, the finances of the business. He gets up in the morning. It's the first thing that is on his mind. He wants to get on his computer. He wants to get to work. If he's not doing that, he wants to be a better leader. He's listening to podcasts, reading books, going to seminars, hiring coaches. If he's not doing that, he's managing the family's financials. You'll oftentimes find him in the evening looking at the portfolio, looking for investment opportunities, checking on where the family's financials are so he can build towards long-term wealth. If he's not doing one of those three things, he wants to go play golf. If he's not doing one of those four things, he wants to spend some time with the kids. If he's not doing that, he'll spend some time with his wife. And he keeps saying that he wants to go to the gym, that he wants to get in shape. He's tired of looking in the mirror and seeing those man boobies from sitting behind a computer all day for 9, 10, 12 hours a day working.
Right.
He notices that he's let himself go. He's put on some weight. And he's not exactly proud of what he sees in the mirror as a reflection. Keeps saying that it's important to him. He'll keep joining the gym, hiring the trainer, buying the gym bag, gym clothes, workout shoes, workout apparel, and all these different things, thinking that those things are going to motivate him to go to the gym. But every day he wakes up, his time, energy, and money gets dispersed in direct proportion to the things that he values most. There just never seems to be enough time, energy, and money left over in the long run to get him the result he's looking for in terms of his physical health. Because anything that we want to make manifest in our life requires not just the investment of those resources, but the consistent investment of those resources over a long period of time, right? And when we are working on the things that we value most in our life, when we are pursuing the things that we value most, we have inspiration. So inspiration meaning from this, we're driven by the spirit within. When we're pursuing something that's low in our values, a goal that's in conflict with our values, we need motivation. We lack inspiration, which comes from within. So we need motivation, which is an external force to hold us accountable to do the thing that we said that we want to do. That's why motivation never lasts, because it's not self-sustaining. That's why Zig Ziglar said, motivation doesn't last and neither does bathing. That's why you do it every day. Rather, just when we're working on the things that we value most in our life, we have eustress. Eustress is the positive form of stress. Like when you want to build a muscle, you stress, the muscle gets stronger. That's eustress. Stress is the same energy in the environment, same conversation, same challenge, same obstacle. But if you're pursuing something that's low in your values, then you're going to experience it as distress instead of eustress. It's just being filtered through our values, right? Because we don't experience the world the way that it is. We experience it through the lens of our values. And so when we're working on things that we value most, we feel we're productive, we're purposeful, we are inspired, we have poise, we have precision, we have discipline. So when somebody is undisciplined, it's not that they're not disciplined, it's that they're trying to force themselves to do something that they don't inherently value.
Right.
Therefore, they feel like they lack the discipline. For any given person, And I've had thousands of people go through our curriculum at this point, right? You find me any person and I'll find an area in their life where they are highly disciplined. It just might not be what they wish it was, right?
Right.
And so now, if we know that our life is perfectly demonstrating at all times what we value most, if we're willing to look, then the question is, why do we spend so much time judging ourselves, putting ourselves down, ridiculing ourselves, undermining ourselves for who we're not, rather than loving ourselves for who we are? And I think that's important because it speaks to self-worth. How can our net worth ever exceed our self-worth? And can it sustainably exceed our self-worth? We hear about lottery winners as an example, and like 90% of lottery winners wish they didn't win the lottery. They feel their life was worse off after the fact because having $1 million doesn't make you a millionaire. A millionaire is something that you become in character and mind. The distinction between the two, the authentic self, I would argue that the authentic self is that expression of your values. That's authentic. When in our company, we're in leadership training, we share this is our core belief. Every human being has something remarkable to offer the world. Authentic leadership is the key to unlocking it. Now, when we say leader, we mean an authentic leader in our world, in our curriculum, is someone who knows their calling and has the courage to answer the call. And so when we talk about knowing the calling, we're talking about values. The courage to answer the call is often much more work because it means shedding the layers and layers of falsehoods and personas, which, by the way, that's why we don't call it personal development. If you look at personal development, it means to develop a persona. And a persona is an inauthentic self. A persona is, if you trace that word back in its etymology, it's a mask. And so a lot of times when we do personal development, we actually say, I see what's wrong with that version of me, so I'm not going to be that person anymore. I'm going to be this person instead. And we keep chasing a different persona from one illusion to the next illusion to the next illusion until we're finally ready for truth. So when we're working with our leaders, we want to help them figure out what their values are. Second step is we want to help them assess, like, are those the values that you most desire? Because some of that is going to be inherited by imbalanced perceptions that have come through childhood, because whatever we perceive to be missing, we'll seek to fill. So as an example, when I first learned this, I realized that I kept saying I want to be an entrepreneur. I failed for 10 years, right? I was a total abysmal, awful failure, embarrassing failures. And I kept telling myself that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But if you looked at my life, didn't demonstrate it. Where I spent my time, where I spent my energy, and where I spent my money was not on my business. I dressed, bought the nice clothes, I had the nice shoes, I had the new gear. I looked successful, but I wasn't actually successful. Right?
Your calendar in your wallet.
Under my wallet, yeah. If you looked at my calendar, I was either at my job or at the watering hole.
I want to, because this is so good, and you're hitting on something and I know your materials. But before we get into this next question, I want people to understand that they can go to is it thepowercode.com? Because
the Power Code, there's a free self-assessment at thepowercode.com to help you figure out what your actual values are. And that's what I call the Power Code. When you're clear about what your values are, you tap into the number one source of personal power that I've discovered in 15 years. Thepowercode.com is a place you can do that for free.
So this unconscious hierarchy of values, once you discover that, then you said something about courage to act on it. I notice whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. In the Bible, that's kind of the whole thing, those two steps. You always see it. There's always the calling and then the courage to the calling. And then there's a process in that. I'm not super biblical or anything like that. But that popped into my brain. It took Moses. He had to run around in the desert for a long time before he finally had the courage. I think it was 40 years or something like that. Before he finally had the courage to where he decided to go be a leader. So is this where most people are stuck? Do you think they're mostly stuck in this unconscious hierarchy of values? They don't know the values? Or do you think they're stuck in the courage part?
I think the average person, so I've had 7,000 people or something go through one of our courses where we take people through the process of identifying their values in a live setting. And I have yet to find someone who started that. Even successful people, even very successful people. I've yet to find someone who started that exercise and knew exactly what their values were. And those were the same when they came out the other end. Because there's so many layers of like so many different personas that we're wearing, the expectations of the external world around us.
The problem is, especially with entrepreneurs, they're doing something wrong and they've done it for decades and they've gotten good at it, even though they hate it. Like,
Man.
like I love marketing. I can do marketing. I love marketing, but it drains me. I could do this podcast with you and I'm all pumped and excited. I've done marketing for decades and decades. You know, you get, and then if a paycheck or your wallet's attached to that, you know, that belief becomes in your mind a mask or a false value. I know you're having to deal with that when you're going through this. It's like, this is my dad's business. He did it. His granddad did it. Now I'm doing it, but I absolutely hate it, but I'm good at it. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Duty and obligation are one of those things that come up quite often in the class. And duty and obligation, think about how much of our society says that, you know, how much rhetoric there is around the topic of duty and how important it is to be dutiful. And we start to wrap our identity.
Yes.
I've had people in our classes or our seminars say, but I'm dutiful. The most important two words. I am, like, this is who they have become as a human. Like, they identify themselves as dutiful. But the space that they're coming from in performing that duty is often an external space. It's somebody else's voice. By default, they're trying to earn the love of a parent, often a father. They're trying to earn the recognition of somebody that they've been looking up to for some time. When we put someone on a pedestal, right? Which, by the way, that's also our values. Like, somebody who expresses our values will tend to put on a pedestal, and someone who challenges our values will tend to put in the pit. We look down on them.
Yes.
But when we put someone on a pedestal and look up to them, we put ourselves in the pit in comparison.
Yeah.
The law of conservation of energy, we've all heard it. The universe is made up of energy. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only transform. Okay? Without going too far down the rabbit hole, on a macro level across the universe, we can see that. At a micro level, that means that everything that can exist in a human being does exist in a human being. Every single characteristic or trait that can exist in a human being does exist in a human being. We're all honest and dishonest, positive and negative, peaceful and wrathful. The only difference is what form in which we express it. When we put someone on a pedestal and we put ourselves in the pit, what's happening is we're too humble to admit that what exists in them exists in us.
Yes.
And so what happens by default is that we begin to subjugate ourselves and subordinate to their values.
And it plays,
in other words,
I'm not good enough.
Yes. And then we try to be like them versus being ourselves. And when you referenced the Bible, I would say that when we look at our values through the lens of teleology, we would say that your values are a window into your soul. It's your soul's calling. When somebody is fully tapped in and they're living by their values, put it to you this way, Jeff Bezos didn't need an accountability partner.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Right. You didn't have somebody waking him up in the morning going, Jeff, stop hitting the snooze button, Jeff. Go ahead and get up. Come on, let's put on your Eric Thomas playlist. Go ahead and get motivated. You said you're going to build the everything store, Jeffrey. He's called from within to go do that. It's difficult and it's hard to build the biggest company in the world.
Like commerce. Come on. Yeah.
Oh, making negative 2 pennies for every sale. I mean, he was upside down for 10 years almost. And to fight through all that and build what he built, that is somebody like we oftentimes in our world, we live in this world that likes to make this distinction between our vocation and our spirituality. There's some difference between pursuing money and pursuing the thing that fills my soul. And I would argue that's not true. I would say that Jeff Bezos is having a very much a spiritual experience. And Warren Buffett, you're going to tell me that Warren Buffett is not spiritually fulfilled managing Berkshire Hathaway the way that he's done?
Yeah.
Imagine if you took that away from him. His life feel as meaningful and fulfilling. Fulfillment comes from filling full our values, by the way. And so I say I don't even remember why I went on the rant to begin with, but if our values are a window into the soul, then, what greater form of worship could I prefer than to honor my soul's calling?
Mm-hmm. You're honoring that higher self, right? It's the ability to tap into that. From there, that's where the abundance comes. I had this in one of my questions to you, and I want to make sure I put this out. There's this perfect timing. How do you uncover what's actual value versus what you think you should value? Because I think a lot of people, they don't even, and I imagine your power code assessment. I mean, I'll go through it too, but I imagine your power code assessment. I encourage you to download it. We'll have the link there, but because that's confusing. Here's what I actually value, and then here's what I think I should value. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. That's where we spend most of our life, meaning that we're spend most of our time, the average person, the masses in life are going to spend most of their time pursuing what they think they ought to do, need to do, have to do, should do, supposed to do, versus what they're called to do. And when we do that, we end up in the self-depreciating cycle of judging ourselves for who we're not versus loving ourselves for who we are. So how do I know that I'm pursuing something that I actually value? Do you experience the symptoms? What symptoms do you experience? Do you find yourself procrastinating, hesitating, or getting overwhelmed, sabotaging, experiencing imposter syndrome? So as an example for yourself, you mentioned that like when you're marketing really well,
right?
But when you do marketing, it doesn't inspire you, it energize you, right? It's a task to be done,
right?
I'd be on the opposite end of that spectrum, right? If you we look at my values. I've done this so many times. I could say that my number one value is my business. So inside of our values are kind of fractal. In my business, do I equally value everything that I do in the business? No, I tend to gravitate towards marketing and sales. Speaking, teaching, marketing, sales. That's where I tend to want to spend the majority of my time in my business. Now, you send me a contract by an attorney, right? And I'm like, who's going to fucking read this thing? And I want to send that off to somebody on my team. It's an important piece of my business as a CEO that I understand these contracts, that I know we're legally bound to, these sorts of things. I just also hate legalese. I don't even know what language that is half the time. You know what I mean? Why couldn't they just say it in plain damn English like the rest of us? But anyway, if I'm having to pour through contracts, oftentimes if I'm pouring through our financials, because I tend to gravitate towards marketing and sales, and we'll find this with most people who do gravitate in that direction, they also don't necessarily like digging into the financials, pretty good at spending it. So I have a team that does that for me, but there's lots of times where I have to pour through the financials. I have to sit in the financial cockpit of the business in order to fly the damn plane. There was a time in my life, here, I'll give you a perfect example. When my business first took off in 2017, we launched at the end of 2016, right after Thanksgiving, and we scaled to $1 million a month in 4 months. By March of 2017, we had our first $1 million month. On the outside, most people thought, oh my God, you hit the big time, man. Successful. The reality is, I was having panic attacks. I was in the darkest place I had ever been in my life. I felt like I was coming apart. I was having anxiety. I was waking up in the morning, and literally as soon as I would open my eyes, most days, I'd have a panic attack set in. I couldn't get out of bed. And then I'd get out of bed, I'd force myself out of bed, go jump in the shower, try to calm down. Oftentimes I took a shot in the morning just to calm the nerves, get to my computer, get to work, focused. I'm in it. I'm doing the thing. And then I would get done with work. I would almost not want to get done with work because that's when the anxiety would come back. I was reaching out to a friend of mine. I had a coach at the time that I was working through the stuff with. And I went back to Hawaii on a vacation thinking that would help, and actually made it work. Once I was unplugged from the business, my anxiety turned into depression. I was having thoughts of suicide and all these things. And I was like, what is going on with me? And there's two things that I discovered in the process. Number one is, and this is probably too deep of a rabbit hole to go down in this podcast, but one of the first things that I realized is when I was a kid, I grew up in a violent neighborhood. Like, we lived right down the street from a housing project. When people think of Hawaii, they think it's like palm trees and paradise everywhere.
No, I saw some pretty horrific documentaries.
Yeah, it's not.
It's the haves and the have-nots, right? And there's
just like anywhere, and a very big divide between the two. We grew up right down the street from the housing projects. I grew up in a violent household. There was domestic violence in my household, but there was domestic violence in every household around me. So it seemed normal. But the thing that my parents fought about most, the source of the violence from a young age, I knew was a lack of money.
This is good.
So I thought that I could make money. I would be safe. And I hit this $1 million a month, which was this goal that I had for quite some time. And I hit $1 million a month, and there was no extra sense of safety. In fact, it felt less safe. I didn't know who my friends were and who my enemies were. Everybody wants something at the time, and there's more to lose than there's ever been. Because of that, I had to come face to face with some of my demons from childhood. The second part of that is, it relates back to what we're sharing here, is when I started my business, see, I fell in love. Like, I started out as an affiliate marketer. I fell in love with advertising and funnels and all the whole nine. And I thought, and I just fell into the coaching space because I would win so many different affiliate contests and be the number one affiliate for different. I would bolt on a network marketing offer and just rank up on some network marketing company like super fast. And people were like, how the hell is he doing it? And so people want to buy courses from me, learn about funnels and learn about ads. And it just organically turned into a coaching program. This is like before everybody and their brother was a coach. I thought that, oh my God, I get to spend all my time talking and teaching about this thing that I love doing. That's the dream. But actually, and this goes back to the email, once I became the entrepreneur, once I had a company that did that successfully, I didn't do any of that stuff. I was hiring and firing and doing project management and running teams and looking at data and going through KPIs and looking at financials and all these different things. And I didn't get to do any of that stuff. I wasn't running ads. I wasn't building funnels. I wasn't doing all that stuff that I used to love doing. And so I was living outside of my values for so long that I couldn't sustain it. None of us are able to sustain it. This is why people get divorced. It's why countries go to war, differences in values. And we cannot sustain for basic.
Because I want to get back to this money thing, because this is so good, what you're saying right now. You're going to help a lot of leaders. And I know you say your net worth really exceeds your self-worth. Do you think when you become successful like you did, and I know we have a lot of leaders, I don't know what happened, but now I'm successful and I'm miserable, this sucks. Do you think it aggressively bounces against your self-worth? Where did the anxiety come from? I know you said from your family and having safety, but here you have $1 million coming in a month and it just made it worse, right? Obviously, if you're taking a shot in the morning, then things have gotten worse. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So one was getting back to my values. A big part of it was shifting my values, right? In the E-Myth, I forget the author's name at the moment. It was like such a good, but he says, oftentimes the baker thinks that if they open a bakery, they're going to get to bake all the time. No, you never bake again, right? Marketer thinks that I love marketing. I'm going to start this business where I coach people on marketing. Never market again.
Right.
And so I realized I had to fall out of love with being a marketer and fall in love with being a CEO. I knew what my values were. And so I started asking myself, okay, like here's all these tasks and responsibilities and duties and obligations. Our values are not static, right? It's not, here's what they are. This is who you're going to be for the rest of your life. It's organic. And so we can, in other words, we can shift this, right? We can use it as a tool. It doesn't have to define us. We can define it as well. And so I took all these things that I just hated about being a CEO. I started asking myself, how is this a benefit and service to my highest values? How is this a benefit and service to my highest values? And I started, this is linking. We call it linking. So I'm linking these things that I once despised doing to the things that I value most, because we can either do what we love through delegation or love what we do by linking it to the things that we value most. So that was a big part of it. The other part of it, when you're talking about the childhood traumas growing up, and you'll notice this about most entrepreneurs, and I've coached lots of them over the years, over 200,000. Most entrepreneurs are control freaks.
Yes. Right.
And the reason is that they're in their childhood, there was something in their childhood that was out of control.
Yes.
Because voids drive values. And so they think that the goal is to gain control. And if they can just control their environment, they will feel that sense of safety that they lacked.
Mm-hmm.
What we'll find in business, and really even in personal development, growth and control are opposing forces.
Right. And there's risk. There's always risk.
And control is itself an illusion.
Right.
Right. And so it's been my experience that most entrepreneurs, every single one that I know of that's done 8 figures, 9 figures, 10 figures in sales, literally every one of them. And I didn't know this at the time because that was my first time going through this stuff. And I kind of felt all alone. But since then, I've been in masterminds. I've been around some of the fucking brightest minds in marketing, sales, and business in general. And just about every single one that I've ever spoken to candidly about what I experienced, share that they experienced the same. There was some point in their evolution where they just hit the wall. Anxiety, depression, lack of fulfillment. There's this moment where there's this kind of come to Jesus moment.
Yes.
Where they have to get real with themselves and find out what is going to be more meaningful, because money isn't it. Money's not that. That's why Jim Carrey says, I wish I could write everyone a check for 10 million bucks so they would see that's not it. But if you've never had a check for 10 million bucks, you tend to go, fuck you, prove it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, he says that. Bro, yeah, this is so good. I was at a 5-star resort and I got super depressed and was crying the first time I went to one. And I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Here I have this beautiful woman with me. Everything's perfect. But yeah, I'm fucking super depressed right now. I was in the Marine Corps and normally I don't cry and all that shit. I just felt like this overwhelming thing. And then I got sick. I was like, fuck it, I'll just go drink. And then the 7 days I was at the resort, I just drank myself every day because I could not handle this. And there's so many leaders that are right what you're talking about, bro. This is so important.
Okay. Fuck it, Jason. I'll go as long as you want to go.
No, we can. Yeah, no, that's fine.
I know. I'm totally down.
Question.
I'm totally down to go with it. One of the things that we do at my advanced classes, we spend 2 days on this at one of my advanced classes. The greatest human illusion, and it will likely be difficult for the average person to fully wrap their mind around this. They'll understand the words, but for it to really land and be integrated into your life is typically a chasm between the way that most people experience life and the reality. And that is, the greatest human illusion that I've ever come across is that we can have one side without the other. That we think that life is supposed to be, like, we think that if we just reach enlightenment, we're going to be always kind, never cruel, always happy, never sad, always positive, never negative, never dishonest, always peaceful, never wrathful. If something quote unquote bad is happening, I must have done something wrong. I must have made a bad choice. I effed something up. The reality is that equanimity is the language of the universe. So in thermodynamics, we can see that in any closed system, the universe being a closed system, there's ultimately equanimity, equilibrium, homeostasis, a balance. I'll give you an example. I was reading about this recently. Black Plague of the 14th century killed tens of millions of people. People alive then thought that mankind must have committed a sin and this was punishment for that sin. What most people don't know is that that during the AIDS epidemic of the 80s and 90s, millions of people were immune to the AIDS virus because of a mutation in their DNA that stemmed from their ancestors who survived the Black Plague.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
So something that of lives. Is it good or bad? It was both, because everything has both. And so if we look at the law of conservation, that everything in the universe is energy, we can look at an atom as an example. And an atom, to be the smallest form of matter in the universe, is to be both equally positively charged and negatively charged. Makes up the fabric of the universe. Then what can exist in the universe that's not both?
Right.
And so I say all that to say that when we label something as good or label something as bad, these are imbalanced perceptions of mind. When I label something as good, what that means is I'm conscious of the benefits, but I'm unconscious of the drawbacks.
Yes, right.
If I label something as bad, I'm conscious of the drawbacks, unconscious of the benefits. But both exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is we start to create these revolutions over time, because the mind wants to, the brain is an adaptation tool. It's looking to adapt and create shortcuts. In cognitive psychology, it's called schema. So our subcortical brain, so our hippocampus will hold on, like our amygdala will tag a memory as good or bad. The hippocampus will hold on to that memory with that label called valency. Anytime something new comes up that enters our environment and stimulates that old trigger, that tag, the brain runs its automated shortcut and we respond to it in the same way as if it were the original memory. Okay. And what happens is we don't live in the present. We recreate our past over and over again.
Did the $1 million a month become the abusive family member?
When I went back and looked, I started going back and looking at different childhood memories that had a lot of negative charge.
Okay.
A lot of, oh shit, that was wrong. I wish that didn't happen. And there wasn't like a ton, in the sense that like when you get this and it clicks, you start working on one, you unravel the rest.
Others, right.
So,
Yes.
so I went back to one of my earliest memories. There's a memory I had where my mom was driving around with my brother and I in the backseat of the van, and she's trying to find my dad because he is not at work where he's supposed to be, and he's not at home where he's supposed to be if he's not at work. So you can imagine she is ripping around town trying to find my dad. She is pissed. Once she finds him, there is going to be a physical altercation.
Right.
And my brother and I are going to witness it. I just vividly have that memory in my mind, and I'm scared. And again, if I'm rich, though, if I get rich one day, I won't have to deal with these things, right? Because ultimately what they fight about all the time, money. So if I have money one day, I won't have to deal with these things.
Right.
But I go back to that memory and I started asking myself, okay, what's the benefit to this? What is the other side of this? I want to bring this moment in my life back to balance. Now, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of science, but when the shortcutted version of this is when we bring equal opposite forces of matter into synthesis in the universe, we create light. This creates light in the mind. It is enlightenment. To see both sides, to see how everything ultimately benefits us, right? And I sat with that memory asking myself, okay, what are the benefits to this? What are the upsides to this? And then I want to look at it through the lens of my values. How does this help and support my values? I'm a marketer by trade, right? How did this help me become a better marketer? I'm sitting in the back of that van and I'm talking to my mom, talking her off the ledge. And I'm trying to get her to realize, hey, Ola, my brother, we're back here. We don't feel safe. Mom, it's going to be okay. That sort of thing. Like when you look at marketing, it's ultimately communication.
Yes. Right.
It's just I was learning communication skills. My mom was helping me fulfill my life's purpose. I wouldn't trade what I do today for anything in the world. I love what I do today. My vocation is my vacation. My mom in that moment was helping me define my purpose. She was helping me hone the skill of becoming a marketer from as young as 5 and 6 years old. It's about the age that I was when this happens. And that's one of just many benefits. But when we bring the mind back to balance, we move from, like, oftentimes when we hold on to resentment, whatever we resent, we attract, create, or become. The place beyond resentment that most of us talk about is forgiveness, right? And forgiveness is better than resentment. Let me say it that way. Forgiveness is better than resentment. Forgiveness is also still the perspective that I'm right, you're wrong, you did me wrong, let it go this time, but don't you ever do that again. And the place beyond forgiveness is gratitude. The place beyond forgiveness is thank you. I see how this benefited me. And if I had it all to do over again, I would want it to be the same. And that is the highest and greatest form of quote unquote enlightenment
Alchemy
that I found. And when I could go back and see like all of those things as a child that I had, all these memories that I had built up that caused me to feel like if I got rich one day, I wouldn't have to face these demons. When I synchronized those things, when I really balanced those things, that was the ultimate form of healing. I can look back now and I don't say, oh, that's wrong, but I'm over it. No, that's wrong, but I dealt with it. That's wrong, but I've processed it. That's wrong, but I've moved on. If I had to go all the way back, I wouldn't change a thing. I see how every time in life, it felt like the floor was falling out from underneath me. It was rising up to meet me. Every in life, I felt like the greatest challenge was also the greatest moment of triumph. It's the reason that we teach this, I really hope that your audience can grasp this as best as possible. We spent 2 whole days on just this topic in our advanced class. That's how deep it is. And we break down all the science and everything. But the reason that I teach this is because if I can show you that the greatest challenge you've ever faced was also your greatest gift, your greatest benefit in life. Once you walk away with that knowing, with that profound understanding, and you've had a visceral experience about it, what the fuck can stop you then?
Yes.
You are armed with the knowledge of knowing that no matter what comes my way, it carries with it the seed of a greater opportunity on the other end. That's why when I went through all that and got through the other side of that, and I was grateful for those experiences in childhood, I set myself free from that anxiety and depression in the process.
That's so good, bro. We'll close right there. That's amazing. Your power code philosophy, this idea that our struggles are feedback rather than failures, that discipline flows from values rather than willpower. this is going to change lives. And I can feel it already changing mine. I'm going to do your free power code. What's the website again that everybody could go to?
Thepowercode.com.
And bro, thank you for being so vulnerable, real. And I know you're looking at legacy. So I know you're dedicating your life to helping others. But it's more than that. You're helping people really know who they are beneath all the programming and the fear. The world needs more leaders like you. People who lead from their wounds and who turn their mess into their message. I appreciate what you're doing. And thank you for taking the time and for being the creator that you are.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much for having me, Jason. Appreciate you, man.